I'd like to do today's tutorial on glass. I have quite a few glass-based renders where glass is an important texture element to the scene, and I got a lot of comments on my glass because they'll be have a lot of detail and look very weathered and worn, and I have gotten more than a few requests to do a tutorial on it. So that's what I'm hoping to do today, is to share my glass workflow. Glass is a super important part of the render. And it not only if realistic glass contributes to the realism, but it also can help with the storytelling. So today I'm going to be working with the scene I have up on the screen right now. It's a really simple scene, just a simple textured floor with some ice cubes and a tree in the glass in like a glass jar. Beauty and the Beast style. So this is the kind of texture that you can get at most just using the basic Blender glass node. It looks pretty okay. It's got some good reflections and it looks relatively realistic. But here's with my glass workflow what you can achieve. And this is with a little bit of color grading. But you can see it looks a lot more interesting, almost like there's an avalanche trapped in it. Like the jar is bigger than its surroundings and it's somehow detached from it. It tells part of the story. It's a little bit more interesting. And so today I'm going to show you how to make glass look just like this, using this scene as an example. So the key differences between these two really are the severity of the reflections, which unfortunately real glass reflections aren't super severe. And since Cycles is a physically based rendering engine, it's gonna give you actually something relatively realistic. The second thing is how it interacts with the objects inside the glass, and there are lots of tricks we're gonna employ to make the glass and the work well with the objects and the lighting, and stuff you're gonna have to tweak for every scene that you do. But this workflow in general will give you really good glass every time. So let's dive right into it, and we're gonna take a look at the scene. So this is the scene. There is the jar and just some ice cubes and the tree. The um the scene inside the jar is lit overhead by a lamp, and it's got the floor in the background, and around it all is this HDRI. So it's really fairly simple setup. Put the jar back on, and as you can see, we're just using for the glass at the moment just a very basic Cycles texturing. This has Cycles glass node. Um, okay, so let's dive right in. So um, I'm gonna assume that you're at an intermediate level for Blender here. I'm not gonna go through the basics of like how to, um, edit mode and rendering and stuff like that. This is just to show you my workflow. But I will have the key presses and everything I'm doing up in the bottom here, and I'll try to explain what I'm doing and the reasoning as I'm going along. Okay, so let's get started. So the way I have the window set up here is I have the rendered view over here on the right, and then I have the shader editor over here on the left. And this is primarily where I'll be working for the duration of this tutorial. Okay, so this is the glass node, basically just a single glass node, BSDF plugged into the material output. Um, and this is the most important parameter of this node right here, which is the index of refraction. So this is basically the angle that the light is changed by as it passes through the glass. So an index of refraction of 1 just means that light passes directly through the glass untouched. It's effectively equivalent to transparency. But as you change the index of reflection, weird stuff starts to happen inside the glass. Something that's really important to note, though, is that if you're at home trying this on your computer, you might see that the glass actually looks different than what you're seeing. And so, one really important element to ensure that any object you have that you want to apply glass material to is thickness. So over here, I actually have a solidify modifier engaged, and it's adding 0.03 meters of thickness. If I turn that off, you can see you actually get some really weird results. And I see a lot of people that sort of struggle right away with trying to get glass to look good in Blender because their objects don't have thickness. So if we add thickness to the object, it immediately looks better. The problem is that it also looks a lot less interesting because the light's effectively just passing through, but it's got some nice reflections, but it's not really doing um, that much to make it look interesting. So we're going to dive into making it look interesting. And the first thing we're going to add is basically an edge to the glass. So when you look at a real glass object, or even not a glass object, but like a sort of reflective object, like a ceramic mug, like something like this, for example, or a plate, your eye can sort of distinguish the edges. Um, your eye can sort of distinguish where the edges are because there's a subtle darkening at the edges. And I'm not sure what physical effect causes that, but we can simulate it in Blender, and it immediately adds a level of grounding and realism to the scene. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to add a mix shader. So Shift A and then search and just add a mix shader in between the glass and the material output. And once we have the mix shader, we're going to mix it with a glossy node. So we're going to take the output of the glossy, plug it into the mix shader, and then we're going to mix them with a layer weight node. So Shift A to search, type layer, add layer weight, and take the facing output of the layer weight node and plug it into the mix shader. And so what this is going to do is it's going to mix these two together based on the parameters of this layer weight node. And since we're using the facing parameter, it's basically going to control how far to the edges versus the middle the mixing will happen. So actually, to demonstrate this, I'm going to quickly override the material. You don't have to do this at home. I'm just doing this as an example. So I'll have a red material here, and I will take a blue material for the glossy and show you what happens when we change the layer weight. So if when the value is at 0, it's all red. When the value is at 1, it's all blue. And then if we invert them, it basically just inverts that. So we want the glass to be in the middle and the glossy to be on the edge. So right now there's no glass. Sorry, right now there's only glossy. Sorry, only glass, no glossy. But if we tick up through this value, it gets more and more glossy until the glossy closes in on the edge. So I'm gonna set it to a value of about, 0.3, which adds sort of these nice reflections to the edge. It just makes them a little more severe, makes the glass look a little bit more interesting. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this color of the edge here and I'm going to bring it down quite a bit. And you can see what this does is it darkens the edges. And this makes the glass seem less transparent and more there. It adds a little bit of realism to it. We're going to make the glossy a little bit more reflective, which is what this roughness value does. So the more you turn the roughness up, the less reflective it gets. The more you turn it down, the more reflective it gets. And so I'm going to set it to around like 0.14-ish. And already this is looking a little bit more interesting. What you can see already is that like this edge is just way more clearly defined. It's better for your composition. It's the scene better. Overall, like this is a really, really easy change. If you do nothing else to your glass, this is a really, excuse me, this is a really easy thing you can do. Okay, so next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make it so that we can see the subject more clearly. So unfortunately, a lot of the stuff we're going to be doing in glass is not very realistic, but sometimes it's not really realism that matters. It's about telling a story. And if your viewer's brain is engaged in trying to understand a story, they're less likely to notice physically inaccurate things. I say this a lot, but sometimes being perfectly photorealistic isn't what lends realism to a scene. And so how we're going to accomplish this is basically we're going to use this layer weight node again, and but instead of fading between a glossy and a glass node, we're going to fade in between a transparent shader and this mix shader. So we want the middle here to be transparent. So let's add another mix shader, and we're going to pipe a transparent shader into it. Just pipe that in there, and we're going to add another layer weight node. So the way I'm duplicating these, by the way, is I just click and then Shift D, and that'll duplicate the node. And we're going to take the facing output, plug it in here. And now if we turn it all the way down to 0, we can see we have all of this shader. If we turn it all the way up to 1, you can see it's completely transparent. And if we flick in between them, you can see the shader starts to come in. But I actually think it's kind of hard to tell. I think the shader is coming in from the wrong direction because we want the glass shader that we've just created to be coming in from the edges, and I think this accomplishes that. So you want to flip the order here. Okay, and I'm going to set it to a value of something like 0.7. So this should have it nice and transparent right in the middle, and we can test this really quick. We'll add another diffuse. Again, you don't have to do this at home, just demonstrating. So this will show us the location of our glass shader, and you can see it's showing up at the edges while leaving this nice transparent area in the middle here for you to see the subject. So let's plug that back in. Okay, perfect. So this is actually coming out pretty nice already. And we can make a couple tweaks. You can you can make it blacker around the edges to compensate for this increased transparency, make it still seem physical and real. Okay, and that's pretty much all we need to do for the glass bit for this particular shader. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make the reflections more complex. I spent a long time trying to figure out how to make reflections look more complicated and interesting, and I've done it for quite a few artworks, and I've used a different method each time. But my favorite one is, and this is kind of cheap, but it's basically just adding another slightly smaller glass that has a different index of refraction, makes it look really interesting. So we're going to save this as our glass, maybe just call glass 1 so that we can distinguish it. Now we're going to duplicate our glass object, and we're going to shrink it just a tiny bit. So Shift D to duplicate, and then hit S and move your mouse to scale it around. So we're going to Shift D duplicate, just scale it just a tiny bit, so you can sort of barely see that it's in there. And now you'll notice this little 2 up here. That's because we have 2 objects sharing the same material, but we want to edit this one separately. So we're going to call this, you're going to click on that little 2 to create a new shader that's assigned to this object, and then we're just going to call it glass 2. And now if we change the index of refraction, uh, it starts to look really interesting, and you can play around with this to find out what works best. The value that I found worked really nice for this was about 0.65, and you can see it's getting that effect you saw in the beginning where it sort of warps everything in the background. I thought that looked really cool, and you can already see that sort of happening here. I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger, and then we're going to make it a little bit transparent. So we don't want it super obvious that there's 2 glasses in there. So we're going to add another mix shader, plug in the transparent node, and then just tweak it a little bit until we get the effect that we're looking for. So if we pull it all the way down here, we get the full effect. If we pull it all the way out here, the whole glass is just transparent. Or actually, maybe it was the other way around. No, this should be full transparent. And then that should be No, okay, yeah, so this is full transparent, and this is the full interior glass. So we're gonna move this around until we get something that looks relatively good. So you can see at this level, you get the effects in the background there, but you don't really see the glass that much. So I like that. That's a value of about 0.4. Maybe we can turn it down just a little bit to like 0.35. So I like the way that's looking. Okay, so this pretty much sets the stage for how interesting the reflections are going to look. And now we're going to quickly add some smudges and stuff to the glass. And so we're going to work on the outside glass. So you want to make sure your outside glass is selected. We're going to be editing the glass 1 texture. And what we're going to do here is we're going to basically just add a whole other node group that is solely focused on adding some smudges. Okay, so Shift A, click search, add another mix shader. And now we're going to add in an image texture. So we're going to add a diffuse shader. So Shift A, search diffuse, then plug in the BSDF modifier into the diffuse shader, and make sure your Node Wrangler add-on is enabled. So if you hit edit preferences, and then search, go to add-ons down here, and then search Node Wrangler. Just make sure that's checked off. It comes default in Blender, so it's just got a bunch of neat keyboard shortcuts that we can use. So now if you click on this diffuse shader and hit Control T, it will allow you to add any sort of texture that you like. So I'll be using a smudge texture. It's really easy. You just Google fingerprint texture smudge, find one you like. The one I'm using is literally the first one because it's really all you need. And we're going to add that, you're going to download it and then just add it to your scene. So if we add our smudges here, let's take a look at how it's looking. Oh, sorry. So you're going to want to, so right now it's trying to map it to a UV surface that we haven't unwrapped yet. So we don't need to unwrap it though. You just take the generator output of the texture coordinate node, plug it into the vector input on the mapping node, and then change this from flat to box. And now if we preview the diffuse shader, you can see you got the smudges all over there. And by the way, if you don't know how to preview a shader, you just Control Shift click on it. And that'll pipe it right into the final output. So Control Shift click on this, it'll show that, Control Shift click, etc. So you can see we got the smudges there. I like that a lot, but we only want the smudges to show, right? Where it's black, we don't really care about it. So we're going to add another mix shader, and we're going to mix the smudges with a transparent shader and just pipe that in there. And now we're looking at the output of this shader. And basically we're going to control where the smudges are showing using a transparency. So Shift A, search, color ramp. So this is the color ramp node. So if we look at what a color ramp node does, basically allows you to scale between any number of values that you want. In this case, we're just using 2, black and white. But so basically we're going to tell it, okay, use white to say show here, use black to mean transparent. So if we take the output of our image and plug it into the color ramp node, you can see that it's showing a black and white image. And excuse me, there we go. And if we change the values of these sliders, you're basically changing the maximum, minimum values of the image. And we're going to use that as a mask to say, hey, only use these smudges. So I like these. I think that's fine. And I'm going to turn the white up basically as far as it'll go to make sure that they show through. Then I'm going to pull this down here. I'm going to take the color output, plug it into the factor. And now if you Control Shift click, you see we flipped it. So it's showing everything except what we want. So all you got to do is just swap these two inputs. There you go. And now you can see you have this pretty not really good looking smudges. They're way too intense. So you can play around with the values on the color ramp to sort of like relax those a bit. You can even go so far as to just remove the color from the diffuse shader and just decide what color you want it to be yourself. So, if you wanted to make it like blue, you could, but we don't want that. So we're just gonna make it like a nice gray. Just get some dirt in there. And then we're gonna mix it overall with a transparent shader to make it a little bit more faded. So add a mix shader in between the smudges basically in the output, and then mix it with a transparent, and then just play around with it until you like how it looks. So just play around with this value here, because if you turn it all the way down, they're just going to look very present and very in your face. If you turn it all the way up, they're just not going to be there. So find a nice middle ground. This is really where the artistic license comes in. I like kind of having heavy smudges, so I'm going to leave that there. And now we can mix it all together. So here's our mix shader. Oops, sorry. Here's our mix shader, the original one. So instead of plugging in from the diffuse, we're going to plug in our full shader into there, and then connect this to connect the overall mix shader to the material output. And now we have some smudges that we can control the size and distribution and aggressiveness of. And it'll be easier to see if I turn off the depth of field. There we go. And so now you've got some little smudges and scratches all over there, and you can play around with that, make it nice. I'm just trying to show you where they are, so you can see the smudges right there. Okay, so you can make it look however you like, and that's pretty much gonna be it for the glass. So let's turn the depth of field back on. There we go. Okay, so now we're pretty much done with the glass. It just takes a lot of finagling and trying to make it look how you want, basically. So you can mix back and forth between how much you want, more smudge, you want more glass, or even you can use the smudge map, this color ramp here, to switch between the two, so you get a very clear mask. So now you can see the smudges are showing up very clearly, and you can relax that or make it more intense depending on how you like. So lots of stuff you could do with that. This is really, really basic smudge stuff. Andrew Price, I know, has some good tutorials on making like phone screens and stuff that have really realistic smudges. This is well below that. But so now your glass is pretty much done. You can see the reflections are looking pretty interesting, coming in nice. And so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add some fake caustics. So you might think this is a little bit cheating, and it definitely only works for a still image pretty much. It won't really work if you have like complex lighting moving around. But if you want to add some reflections and stuff to the ground, you can just by like Googling images of caustics and using those as a texture that you add to your scene. So the one that I'll be working with is just a very simple caustics texture. So you're going to go to Shift A in the viewport and you're going to add an image as a plane and find whatever caustics texture you like. So I'm going to be using, um, where did I put it? Uh, where's my caustics texture? It's a smudge. Okay, so I guess we're gonna find the caustics texture. Um, Caustics texture glass. I think this is the specific search I used to find it. Ah, here we go. Oh, right, it's in my pictures. Okay. Um, Here we go. So it's in pictures. There's our caustics texture. Um, and so we're just gonna, you can see it's right here in the scene. We've added it as an image. It's right there. Now we're just gonna lay it flat on the ground and move it out here, somewhere where you might realistically expect to see some caustic lighting effects. We're gonna bring it up just a tiny bit above the floor plane. All right, and we're gonna make it bigger. So you can see the caustics are right there. And now we're gonna make it transparent. So if you click on the object and go to its node map, you can see this is what the texture looks like. Um, so instead of using the alpha from the image, of which there is none, we're going to mix this uh, with a transparent shader. And we're going to use the color map of the image as our transparency map. So if you take the output from the color map, plug it into the factor on the mix shader node, add a color ramp, and if we Control Shift click on it, we'll see that the color ramp basically corresponds to exactly what we want to be lit up and what we don't. And you can see now that it's showing only the parts we don't want to be lit up. So just flip those on the node editor, and you can see you've got some weird looking caustic looking things there. We're going to play with that a little bit more to make it nicer. So first of all, we're not going to use the principled shader. We're actually going to, we're not going to use that color on the principled shader. We're going to use a different texture. So if you pretty much Google caustics rainbow texture, you'll find a bunch. And you want to pick one that looks something like this, where it's got like the caustics rainbow effect. And just download that and plug it right into your principled shader. So just click on principal, hit Control T. That will open up this and open up your caustics image, this little rainbow thing, and use that. And if we take a closer look at it, you can see that looks a little bit more realistic, and we're just going to make it pretty transparent. So add another mix shader, just click on the mix shader, hit Shift D to duplicate, pipe it through, and then add a transparency shader, mix them together to taste. And so if you see, if we bring it all the way up to 1, it's going to disappear. If we bring it all the way down to 0, it's going to be all there. So I'm going to make it something like that. And if we make it even bigger. So the way I'm moving it around here is right as I've selected it, hit G to move, and then Shift Z to move it only in X and Y. So you probably know that grab Z, X, Y will let you move it in any of the cardinal directions. But G Shift and then the direction will let you move it in the other 2 directions. And so we got something right there. Looks relatively okay. You can play with that, make it look a little bit more realistic. But you're pretty much done at this stage. A lot of this is going to be working with the scene and making it look how the scene wants you to make it look. There's just got to be a certain give and take with your lighting and with the stuff in your scene. And if you just keep trying and keep experimenting with general workflow, you'll come up with something a little bit different each time. But it'll always be something interesting. Before I leave, I just want to walk you quickly through, in case you don't know about how the different elements of the scene are made. The HDRI, you can pick your own HDRI just by searching for free HDRI download, and usually something like Polyhaven will pop up, and you can just pick an HDRI, which is basically a map that lights your scene in 3D. So the HDRI is the stuff in the background that you're seeing there. And you can add the HDRI by going to the world map and clicking on going to the world map and for the surface using an environment. Sorry, for the color using an environment texture and then just picking your map from the finder. So for the depth of field, I've got the camera set up for that. I've found that the best settings that work are, for a scene like this where you want to convey realistic scale, I'll put it at like 100 millimeters, something kind of a little bit extreme, because the default's usually around like 50. And then you want to just scroll down, depth of field, check off this box. I have an empty set up in the scene, so Shift A, add empty, and I've named it depth of. I will now name it depth of field. Um, and if you just click on the camera, you can select which object is your depth of field, and it will focus on that object. So if I move the empty around, it will focus where the empty is. That's really helpful for setting and doing the composition of your scene. The key value you're going to want to change is the f-stop. So if you make this really big, it's not going to add much depth of field at this scale. But if you make it really small, like 0.3, it'll add a really nice artsy effect. And then for the floor, I'm just using textures that I got from textures.com. So if you just look up like a wood floor or something, you'll find stuff like this. So wood floor, you're gonna get all sorts of patterns. Just pick one you like and then download all of these. And I can show you another tutorial how to apply them in a scene, but it's pretty straightforward and no map that looks like this. But yeah, so everything else is pretty basic. Let me know if you have any questions about the setup or about the glass stuff. So thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful in some way. It's good to be back. I'm hoping to be making some more of these blended tutorials very soon. Yeah, it's been a while for me, so I'm sure there's stuff I can improve on. So just let me know in the comments. But yeah, thanks so much for listening and keep on Blender.